The Trafigura Scandal. In 2006, Trafigura, a large multinational commodities trader, was involved in a major environmental disaster in Côte d'Ivoire, a country in West Africa. The company had purchased a cheap and highly toxic petroleum product called coca naphtha, which had to undergo a dangerous chemical process called caustic washing to make it usable. This process produced a highly toxic byproduct known as spent caustic. The decision to dump the waste, instead of properly disposing of the waste in a safe and legal manner, which would have cost about $620,000 in Europe. Trafigura chose to pay a fraction of that amount, $17,000, to have the toxic sludge dumped illegally in Abidjan, the economic capital of Côte d'Ivoire. They managed to find a local contractor who would dispose of the waste for a price far below its true disposal costs. Trafigura's approach wasn't to seek a solution to properly dispose of the waste, but to offload it at the cheapest cost possible regardless of the consequences. The key internal email that reflected this attitude read, "I don't know how we dispose of the slops, and I don't imply we would dump them, but for sure, there must be some way to pay someone to take them." This cold calculating mentality of externalizing costs is at the heart of the story. When a company views harm done to people and the environment as just a cost that can be passed on to others, the moral and legal aspects are sidelined for the sake of profits. The aftermath. On August 19, 2006, trucks filled with the toxic waste were dumped in more than 18 locations around Abidjan, including near residential areas, water sources, and market gardens. The toxic substances caused immediate health effects in the local population, including headaches, vomiting, respiratory problems, nosebleeds, skin burns, and panic. More than 100,000 people sought medical treatment, and at least 15 deaths were officially recorded. However, long-term health effects remain uncertain, in part due to the company's failure to disclose the full content of the waste. The local community was left to deal with the aftermath of contaminated soil, water and air with no recourse or compensation from Trafigura. The company never fully disclosed the exact chemical makeup of the waste, further complicating efforts to treat those affected. The corporate logic. Trafigura's actions were not just the result of negligence, they were driven by a rational, albeit deeply unethical, economic logic. By externalizing the cost of safe disposal and shifting the burden to a powerless local community, Trafigura maximized its profits. The $17,000 spent to dispose of the waste in Côte d'Ivoire was a fraction of what they would have paid in Europe. To the company, the damage to human health and the environment was a cost problem to be externalized. This is a clear example of market failure in economic terms, where the real costs, environmental damage, human health and social well-being, are not reflected in the company's decision-making process. Externalities like these are a key feature of capitalism when businesses prioritize profit maximization over social responsibility. The role of economics. As you mentioned, economic theories, particularly neoclassical economics, often operate under the assumption that businesses act as rational profit maximizers. However, in cases like Trafigura's, these theories fail to account for the real-world consequences, such as the lack of consent and information among the affected communities. The people in Côte d'Ivoire had no idea what was being dumped in their midst, nor were they compensated for their suffering. Under economic models that treat human harm as a mere externality, the system incentivizes businesses to offload costs onto the most vulnerable, rather than internalizing the true social costs of their actions. Trafigura's response and legal fallout. After the disaster, Trafigura faced massive public backlash, and legal action was taken. The company initially tried to cover up its involvement and even sued the BBC for broadcasting a documentary on the scandal. However, in 2009 Trafigura reached a settlement with the victims, though the full extent of the compensation and accountability remains a subject of controversy. The case highlighted the dangerous consequences of weak regulations in developing countries, where multinational companies can take advantage of lax enforcement to engage in harmful practices. It also underscored the limitations of mainstream economic theories that prioritize profit over people. Larger implications. The Trafigura scandal is an example of how the capitalist profit motive came into extreme social and environmental harm. It shows the deep flaws in economic systems that don't account for the true costs of corporate actions, especially in the context of globalization, where companies can shift costs from richer, regulated countries to poorer, less powerful ones. It also raises questions about corporate accountability, the responsibility of global supply chains, and how nations and international bodies enforce environmental laws. The human toll in Abidjan remains a painful reminder that corporate decision-making based on profit alone can have catastrophic consequences. So, to your point, this isn't just about market failure in a narrow economic sense, it's about how market forces can be weaponized to externalize harm and how greed and power in the corporate world can lead to real-world suffering. What do you think about this? How do you feel about the way corporate interests like these are able to operate with such little accountability? Kindly subscribe to my channel.